Well, hello and welcome to another week and another session of Remote Teaching and Learning webinar brought to you by 3P Learning. My name is Alan Duggan. I'm Global Head of Education here at 3P, and I'm really glad that you could join us today. I have to firstly apologise because we are having some technical challenges, and that's the nature, I guess, of working remotely, working with technology, and we all as teachers know the challenges of that. So I'm hopeful that you can now see a PowerPoint screen. We'll share for a little while, and that you can hear Mandy, who is currently with us. Mandy Bradshaw is also on the line. Mandy, can you hear me?
Yes. Just wanted to let you know, Alan, we can see your lovely your PowerPoint at the moment, so just wanted you to know.
Oh, okay, that's fine. We're having real problems with the technology today. The PowerPoint won't share, and we have all experienced that in our classroom. So I am going to run with it. It's interesting because I decided that we were going to have a name for each episode, an interesting name. And this week's title is "It's like building a plane mid-air while flying it." And I'm sure that you all know exactly how that feels. I feel like I am building a plane mid-air while I'm flying it. So, welcome. As I said, my name is Alan Duggan. I am Global Head of Education. I'm glad that you are joining us again this week. With me on the line is Mandy Bradshaw. Mandy is our Education Publishing Lead here at 3P and also a teacher. Mandy, why don't you introduce yourself to everyone that's joining us?
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Alan. Also, I just wondered really quickly if people were able to put in the chat yes or hi or something if you can hear, just to double check that you've got us okay, because we were having technical and are having technical issues. That's just further down on your little screen that you get to see with your mute buttons and things like that. If you can see where the chat part is, if someone's able to put in there hi or hello or anything, just so we know we're broadcasting, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, we've got people that can hear us, Mandy. I am getting lots of people tell me that we can hear, that they can hear us.
Great, thank you. So yeah, I am Mandy Bradshaw, and I'll put my webcam on. Hopefully it works. Hello everybody, and yeah, so I was a primary school teacher. Alan doesn't like it when we say was. You know, you're once a teacher, always a teacher. So I was teaching around mostly year 3 to 6, always in New Zealand, and did that for about 10 years before moving to 3P Learning to see what else was out there in the big wide world. You know, you can get very insulated as a teacher in your cozy classroom life. So yeah, I've been with 3P Learning for about 4 years now, and actually it might be more like 4.5. I just saw that the other day and it surprised me. And I really enjoy it because I have always loved, you know, technology and how can we reach kids through technology. I love maths and I love education, so it kind of ticks all those boxes. Even if I have to work with Alan, you know, I just work around that. But yeah, so it's an absolute pleasure to be on with all of you this evening, this afternoon, or whatever time it is whoever's dialed in these really strange times that we're all experiencing. Even though I'm doing my normal job day to day, my normal life is definitely not the same, and we've been thinking and talking a lot about the teachers and how it must be for you all. So that was a long introduction, but there you go. That's the way.
Thank you, Mandy. So for those of you who joined us last week, you will remember that we spoke a fair bit about what it was like to survive, and in this situation, what it was like to kind of journey through. And we also spoke about the importance of connection and how to survive that journey. And so this week we're going to continue the conversation. One of the pieces of feedback that we got last week was that it would be really good to find a way for us to stay connected between webinars. And so we have set up a Facebook page, and I'll give you the link to that hopefully when the technology works for me before the end of this chat. But we've set up a Facebook page, where we can connect throughout the week. Mandy will be there. If you were with us last week, Chris will be part of that as well. Beverly, who was also part of some of our webinars this week. And the plan is over the coming weeks to really provide 2 opportunities for us to connect in the week. One that maybe suits Northern Hemisphere time frame better, and one that suits Southern Hemisphere, and really look to explore the ideas together. As I said last week, this is not about us telling you how to do it. We certainly don't have the answers. We don't have the polished answers, but we want to kind of connect. We want to have a conversation. We want to see if we can really begin to talk to you and explore what's going on. So can you, if you can, just down at the questions section on the control panel, the questions section on the control panel down on your right hand side is where we will communicate with each other. So I'd love for you to take the chance just now to introduce yourself. We can see your name from where you logged in, but why don't you tell us where you're from, and whether you were here last week or not, and at the moment, what's front of mind, what's worrying you, what sort of things are going on just now for you in terms of education and schools, and that will give us a framework to make sure that we're kind of exploring and talking about the right things today. So just down in the question section, maybe 3 or 4 from the bottom, why don't you introduce yourself, tell us a bit about where you're from, what age or stage you are teaching, and what's front of mind, what's worrying you just now. We'd love to hear that. Mandy, I think for me, I am now a few weeks into this, and I kind of watch what's going on around the world, and I think for me, I'm beginning to see us make a solution or make a makeshift solution around students, content, and kind of learning. So putting content and resources in students' hands in order for them to work. But I think we are still feeling the pain of how to connect and look after these students, particularly those that are the most vulnerable in our society. And I think we'll touch on that a little bit. But for me, that's probably front of mind for me this week around that connection.
Yeah, I agree. And I feel
Andy,
strongly.
what's your thoughts? What's going on for you?
I felt strongly, Alan, about the equity situation or question, issue, however you want to put it, that we know there's going to be kids who are online and they've got all the support in the world, their parents are there, they're engaged with the learning, but we're always going to have those kids where even being able to reach them is an issue. So as a teacher, we feel that intensely, and so it's how do we best 2 things. How do we best try and manage that in terms of trying to reach everybody that we can, but also managing the emotions around that and accepting that the same as in the classroom, you actually can't always achieve 100% everywhere when you want to. There's going to probably, I imagine, be a level of acceptance around that, which is really hard for teachers to stomach, because we like the idea of reaching everybody. And in this situation, that's just made things, 1,000 times harder. So that's always front of my mind, as it's a big question. Wondering how the teachers are feeling about that, how the ways that they're considering of dealing with that, and what we can maybe bring up in a chat together here, some solutions or suggestions.
Excellent. Okay, well, let me run through and do a few welcomes. I might not get through everyone, and I will apologise if I pronounce your name wrong. So we've got Aaliyah from Perth, teaching year 3. Leanne, first time. Leanne, welcome. Leanne is worrying about working from home and feeling guilty about that, and already missing her class. I know that guilt is a whole host of an issue that we are all feeling as teachers. How do we manage that? How do we deal with the guilt of working through that? We've got, and we'll talk some more about that. We've got Robin, first time to the webinar. Welcome, Robin. Sarah in grade 2, teaching grade 2, I should say. And we've got Esther, first time here, setting up online learning for year 1. That's a real challenge, Esther, and hopefully be able to talk a little bit about that as we go through. We've got Julie teaching year 1-2. We've got multi-stage remote. How do we do that? We've got some Victorian, Fran and Lauren in from Victoria. Auckland's Mandy, just close to you. Penny's in from Auckland teaching year 4. And Despy says that she is teaching year 2. She's tech savvy, but want to be all over it when we start back. Feel safe at home with my family here. All good here. That's good to hear that. And we've got Emily, an AP from Sydney, teaching kindergarten. Really worried about differentiation and assessment moving forward. Let me just make some notes as we go through that. I think I've got a daughter in kindergarten this year, Emily, and it's definitely an interesting challenge as we've tried to be the remote teachers this week and kind of work through that. We've got someone from Northern Beaches teaching year 3. Most schools are still officially open. The bulk of our students are now learning from home. I think that's a real challenge that we'll touch on as well just now. How do you manage the fact that we've got some students in classrooms looking at face-to-face and others in the distance? How do we, again, to that point, Mandy, is about equity, but also just generally, how do I manage it? What does it look like? We've got Leah from Melbourne, didn't join it last week, but looking for some ideas around virtual learning. Mark from Caboolture in Queensland, looking for ideas for teaching remotely. And there's a whole host of other ones. And I think really as we begin to work through these questions, let's start off, Mandy, just by talking about the situation that we find ourselves in and this planning to deliver remote teaching and learning. I think one of the things this week that I have really come to the conclusion, and we touched on this a little bit last week, but I've really come to the conclusion that this is not homeschooling. We are not trying to provide resources for homeschooling. This is remote teaching and learning, and it's remote teaching and learning where in many parts of the country, Victoria and New South Wales particularly, but it's going to come to the rest of Australia, and we already have it in New Zealand. We're in a point where we're in lockdown. We can't really take our young people out. The libraries are closed. The museums are closed. In a homeschooling planned environment, you would have the option to take students or your children out. So firstly, it's not a homeschool environment that we are working in. Secondly, I think I would say often when you're homeschooling, the resources that you are using are kind of targeted or differentiated by outcome rather than by input. I'm now a week and a half into home or having my 3 children at home. I've got a 12-year-old, a 9-year-old, and a 6-year-old at home at the moment. Sorry, I should say a 12-year-old, a 10-year-old. You would never forgive me for that, and a 6-year-old at home. And really the challenges are that they are trying to follow specific resources that they have been given from their schools around what they should be doing and how they should be doing it. So how do we work our way through that? And I think there's a couple of things I would say, and I'll hand over to Mandy, because I want to talk a little bit about what our distance or our remote toolbox might look like. And a couple of the points, just to recap from last week, one of the things that we spoke about last week was you will absolutely make mistakes in this journey. That's the only thing that we can be sure of. We will fail often, and the key is to fail fast, pick yourself up and move on from that and kind of continue on your journey, because we will all fail in this journey. I think the other thing to say is that at this point in time, what we're looking to find is solutions that work. We're not necessarily looking to get in a space where we would deliver educational excellence in this journey, at least not to start with. And I know that that's really hard for us as teachers, because as teachers, we are perfectionists. 80% is not good enough. We want 100%. We want to deliver perfect lessons with perfect resources and perfect learning experiences, and that's great, and that's noble, and we all identify with that. And it just shows, you know, we had 180 people register for this webinar. People are keen to figure out how to do this and to do it well. And so the first thing is everyone needs permission to fail. Everyone needs permission to try things out and realize that some things are not going to work. And the other thing that I think was really important from last week that we all remember is that this is not about providing resource overload to your young people. This is not about figuring out how much resource I can get in front of them. How many sheets can I get printed off into a pack if we're talking about a work pack for Kinder Year 1, or how much stuff I can put up on my learning management system, whether it be Canvas, Moodle, or whatever, so that they're kept busy. We're not necessarily looking for busy work. We're looking for a real opportunity to to enhance the learning and to close the learning off. So when you're thinking about how you plan your remote learning, your remote teaching, your distance resources, think about not just the content, but think about the importance, the real importance in trying to make sure that the learning is rounded off. And I'm not saying that to put pressure on. I'm not saying that to kind of make people feel more guilty about what they need to do. But let's just remember that there's an importance in closing off learning. Mandy, I should probably hand over to you at this point to say some stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a lot to say. I want to preface this, which is perfect that I couldn't say it right, because what I want to say is that we are not, by any stretch of the imagination, coming to this as the experts in the situation. And one thing that I really would love to see in this conversation is the culture where people can call out that they're struggling. That this is, there'll be some teachers that we know of that, have got it all sorted and they've got their weeks planned, and there may be those people, but I would say the majority of people at the moment are in totally unknown land. And I would say not only would it be lovely to just, let's develop a culture of we're all learning here. It's an absolutely unprecedented situation. You're not supposed to have all the answers straight away. Fail fast, as Alan said, and actually share the failure. Talk to others and say, I tried this, it absolutely bombed, and be real in the situation. And I also think it's going to be really important, and I can say this because I'm an outsider, I'm not buried in the thoughts that you're probably in at the moment. Looking from the outside, I'd say give yourself time. It's only just it's really new. I mean, it's weeks into this, and in New Zealand, we're 1 week into a full lockdown, and it's really new. So I would say, okay, do you have to have all the answers to how this is going to work right now? I would say that would be, crazy. So you need to give yourself time to ease into it and try things and fail fast and share with other people, and even have a sense of humor about it. These kids aren't going to fall down and never be okay again because you took a few weeks to work out what was going on. In fact, they're going to be okay no matter what, right? But it's going to be unusual, and we're going to be approaching things in a completely different way. I think what's going to be really interesting is what is the expectations of your leadership, of your management, about what you've got to do in these times, and there'll be such a variation in that. But I would kind of argue that none of those people have been through this either. They may have talked about situations like this, but I'd probably say that's likely to be rare. So I would imagine that there's probably quite a lot of room for innovation, and for you to be able to say, you know what, this is really working for me or my kids, or to come up with suggestions. I could be wrong, but that's I would hope that there's a bit of wriggle room in terms of what your expectations are at the moment. Ellen and I were talking about the importance, and we're talking about his young daughter and what's going to engage young kids, especially those kindergarten age kids at the moment. And it's really unlikely to be worksheets, and what can happen, and we know this from evidences, when parents are trying to be when children are at home and the only person they've got in the house to help them at that moment is their parents, it can become quite a negative situation if the parents are thinking, oh, you've got to get through this worksheet of 30 multiplication facts, and the kid's just totally unengaged about it, and it just becomes quite a cycle of negativity. What works probably better is that whole, how can you engage the kids in the learning with the family and what's actually going on in the household. So I don't know whether this fits in, and it'd be lovely for you to put in the chat whether that's, this is crazy, this is not what our management's saying we need to do. I'd love to hear that. But we talked about, is it possible to actually look at what are some of the things that go on in the households that are regular with the, we all know there's the baking, there's the even hanging out and washing with, 2 pegs for each one. What are the kind of situations and contextual maths things we could come up with that relate to things like that, and baking, and even things you've watched in movies, make a song together. I don't know, we talked about it, the real key to engaging kids at this time is going to have to be getting real about the context that they're in. Of course, there's going to be the more formal learning as well, but if you can weave in that real life stuff at the moment, I think that's going to be key to also taking the stress off you, because at the end of the day, you can't control what's going on in that household. And as Alan was saying about closing the loop, I mean, that's going to be a real challenge, and it'd be really interesting to hear how different people are managing the feedback loop. So how are you finding out what the kids are doing? How are you feeding that back to the kids? What kind of communication are you having with the kids? Because of course, not every child has access to a laptop and things. So I've done a lot of talking. Alan, are there some things we can talk about from the chat?
Yeah, so I've just been scrolling through the questions, and there's loads, and that's great. Thank you, and keep them coming, and we'll try and get through as many of them as we possibly can. I think there's one theme that's coming through just now. There's lots of people joining us today who are teaching further down that kind of prep K1 space, who are worried about a number of things: access to IT, how we bring IT in there, how we connect with our lower socioeconomic students, particularly if we feel like technology is a barrier, particularly if we feel that education is not valued at home, particularly if literacy is a barrier at home with the parents as well as with the students. So let's kind of zoom into that for a little second and talk about some things that could happen down that end for a second, and much of it can be replicated further up. But you know, we've done a survey at 3P, and we're committed to continuing to do surveys to understand where teachers are at. We need to take a kind of pulse check of what's going on, and themes that are coming through are things like equity of technology, things like engagement, online safety. And I think the first thing I would say to those of you that are in that further down space is managing expectations is really important. Managing parental expectations. You know, I think there was a great comment from I think Anne-Marie said some parents don't have the patience and understanding to deal with their kids. Some have toddlers, some have businesses that are falling down around their ears. Some are worried about the elderly relatives, and some have are health professionals, and teachers are completely out of control and can't control any of that. And that's such a valid point, Anne-Marie. There's so much going on in the houses of these young people. They're missing the stability of school. They're missing the stability of their teachers. And we've got no idea what sort of things are going on at home, what sort of stresses are moving it. And so I think when it comes to thinking about planning and engaging your young people, think about how you can engage with them. So I'm thinking in that Kindy 1-2 space, that Prep 1-2 space, where there may well not be device accessibility. There may well not be a huge amount of laptops or iPads or tablets. What we do know is that the vast majority of households, not just in Australia and New Zealand, but around the world, the vast majority of households have access to mobile phones. And we know that the vast majority of those mobile phones are smartphones. So think about things like, is there a way that we can build young people's love of literacy by pointing them towards some audiobooks? And there's a whole host of audiobooks that are now free for the duration of this journey from a whole host of companies, from Amazon's Audible through to authors themselves, put them on there. But there's also people on YouTube just reading books, authors reading books and other things. So think about, is there a way that we can connect young people and build that love of literacy? Is there a way that we can give some ideas, even if it's on a phone, to watch a story being read to the young people? And I get that there are equity challenges, and I get that in many places they may well not all have access to that, and that's a big challenge. Mandy and I have had lots of conversations offline about the equity challenge and what that looks like. But really what we're trying to do is create options. All of the things and the resources that you provide, particularly further down the school, are not necessarily going to be taken by every home, every student, every family. So it's about kind of giving a selection of things to think about. I said this in last week's webinar, so I apologise if you were hearing it again, but I'm a teacher by trade. My wife is also a teacher by trade. She works in education and is working remotely at the moment. We've got 3 young people, 3 children at home, and last Thursday we had an awful day. We had a fail day, and we were both teachers. And we got to the point where I had a conference call just after lunch. My wife had calls to do just after lunch, and you know that way where the temperature in the house was just rising. You could feel it. The tension was coming, and we got to the point where we really had no choice but to put well, we had lots of choice, but we got to the point where what we did was we put our 3 kids in front of the movie, because that was the way to diffuse the tension that was in the house. And as I'm on my conference call, I'm feeling incredibly guilty about this failed teacher kind of standing here telling you all these great ideas, but he can't get through it himself. But in actual fact, that's part of the strategy. How can we help parents diffuse things that are going on? And so our job becomes incredibly diverse. When my kids got to the end of the movie, I gave my 12-year-old the task of writing an essay that kind of walks through the good versus evil part of the story and communicate that. I got my middle son to write a bit of a description of his favourite character. What was it about him that made him his favourite character, and so on. And then for my youngest, my kindy kid, I got her to draw a picture of her favourite character. Now, is that the sort of thing that we would necessarily do in our classrooms? No, but it's the type of thing that continues to grow some learning and continues to develop some learning. So I think thinking about some really practical ways for us to connect families with some resources that might work. And like I said, it's really important to make sure that we understand that resources and things that we provide are not going, we can't control whether they're done or not. I think as teachers, we are control freaks. I'm a control freak, and I'm sure that most of you would be happy for me to say that you are too. We're control freaks. We like to control what's going on in our classrooms in a really good way, and the control's taken out of us. I've got no control over the internet access at home, or the device access, or the value placed on the education. I can only provide the opportunity. And in many ways, I think what we are seeing in this incredibly bizarre time that we find ourselves in is a rebalancing in many ways of parental opportunity in learning. We really are moving back into that. What does it mean to be a partner in my young person's learning? What does it mean to be a partner in that education? And so, whilst there is a whole load of things going on at home, and there's a whole load of things that we are not in the, we're not able to control, we need to think about just providing opportunities. Things like getting them to build something using Lego, which most houses have, but again, not all do, and we're not in control whether that's there for those younger people. Getting a task that builds around that, getting a task that involves them having to draw or colour in, all those things. But the big challenge is then, how do we then close off that learning? Like, how do we then validate that learning has happened? How do we then kind of get feedback? And that's a real challenge, because I think particularly around the space of kind of literacy and numeracy, we've got a big challenge in the Southern Hemisphere is we're 8 weeks into the new school year. You've got kindy class, you're still doing really elementary blending and sounding and sight words and all of that really early stuff. How do we do that? How do we do that in a way that is really difficult for us to do? And so I think, us needing to give opportunity, give options is really important in that lower space. Mandy?
Yeah, one thing that I do want to, sorry, it's kind of off topic with what you were just saying there, Ellen, but I think it's been sort of playing my mind. You said somebody was feeling guilty about the working from home situation, and just to briefly touch on that, I think Ellen and I, we actually experienced that even though we've got full-time jobs online. The working from home, if you've never done it before, is actually a whole beast in itself. So you're used to that frazzled, fast classroom feeling. And if you're feeling calm and there's a cup of tea that's not cold beside you while you're Googling things that you could do with your class, you're still working. It's just that you're so used to, 30 people needing you and your cup of tea being cold. It's not like that out in this world. I can actually have a cup of tea. It might be busy, but it actually took me a long time to get used to, even though I'm not frazzled, I'm actually still working. So you can probably let go of a lot of those feelings of guilt when you realize that's just a different way of working. When you're in a classroom, we all know it's high energy all the time. I also was thinking about judgment, and we normally judge ourselves, well, not 100%, but we judge ourselves on performance. How did the kids go? We did the pre-test, we did the post-test, we know there's a lot of stuff happening in between, but we do look at how things have gone. I feel like from what Ellen was saying before, I started to think it's almost like in this situation, the only thing you can judge yourself on if you want to be thinking about how you're performing in this situation is the level of opportunities you provide. What happens after that is pretty much out of your control. So it's just like, have I thought about all the different ways I can provide opportunities? Have I considered the, what do I do with that child who only has a phone at home, a smartphone maybe? If you've done all of that and you're considering the ways you can engage the parents and all that, that's going to probably be where you're, even if we try to close that feedback loop, it's more going to be for the student's sake, really, so that they know that there's, it's real, but there's someone caring about them in terms of their learning, that wasn't just a throwaway task, but it's not there so that you can then, judge them and judge yourself on how it's going. It's more about the opportunities that you provide, as Ellen said. Yeah, and I completely forgot I had something else. It's gone now, Ellen. So, do we have any other questions?
I might jump in, Mandy, if it's gone. Yeah. Is that okay? There's a whole host of other questions, and I might move on. There's a couple of questions that have come in around what did I mean when I said closing off the learning. And I think that for me, what I mean by closing off the learning is really how do we maybe value the learning? How do we prioritize the learning that's happened? How do we provide feedback for it? So, for example, we're potentially for our kindy and lower down kids giving a pack, a pen and paper pack of work to work their way through. How do we provide feedback on that? How do we validate whether that's been done correctly, whether that's been done well, whether that's been done authentically? How do we manage whether the parents done it or the students done it, whether the older sibling has done it? And so I think it's really important that we try and challenge ourselves to make sure that we're not work, because I think there's a real chance for us to provide busy work in this opportunity. It's things that keep them going. But what we're going to find if we do that is we're going to find that they are quite quickly disengaged, because the students want the value. And so there's a real challenge around thinking about, if I'm given a pack of work, let's say that it's a physical pack of work that is sent out or collected by the parents or gets home, is there a way that gets back to the teacher? Is there a way that gets feedback from the teacher? Is there a way that is connected back so that the student feels like the teacher is still connected and valuing their learning? That's what I mean by closing off the learning, making sure that there's not all of this learning hanging out there without it being somehow closed off, validated, approved. And I'm not for one second standing here advocating that you should be getting every worksheet back and marking every worksheet. I'm not suggesting that at all. I'm thinking about, if you've got technology access, there are programs and apps out there that are available where you get parents to take a picture of it, and it appears, it comes to you, and you can mark it on screen or provide a video feedback that the student can see. Or there's ways for you to get, identify every fifth sheet or the key sheets and the key learning to get back to the school somehow, so that you can then mark it and validate it. What I would say in all of this is, make sure that whatever you do in that space, you're making it sustainable for yourself. Make sure that you need to plan how to close that loop and keep it in a sustainable way. And if there is a way, leverage some self-assessment, give some guidance to the parents. And these are ideas, these are not musts. Please don't walk away from here. The last thing we want you to do is walk away from here feeling like, I'm not doing that, and I'm not doing this, and I'm not doing that. We're trying to give you some ideas, connect with other people, and go, you could leverage some self-assessment for kids that are a little bit further up the school in ways that they will be able to self-assess and reflect. You could harness the power of peer assessment if you've got the technology to do it, but really think about, how do we close off that loop? And I think that kind of leads into communication. There's been a few questions around parental communication, parental feedback, and that sort of stuff. And I think that's so important, because you want to manage the narrative. I think one of the biggest pieces of feedback that I have heard as I've spoken to teachers and school leaders, both in the Southern Hemisphere and in the UK and the US over these last 2 weeks, is the parental expectation is really difficult to manage, because you've got some parents, and again, we're probably talking further down into that kindy prep 1-2 space, where you've got parental expectations that you will provide enough work for that child to sit at the dining room table from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. And we all know that so much of what happens in those early years is about social construct, it's about social interaction, it's about learning social interactions. And so much of the formal learning is actually a small percentage of the time. So the resources that we're sending home actually are about a smaller percentage of time. And so therefore there are some other things that we could provide, a list of suggestions of things that we could do outside of the work that's there. So there's a whole host of ways to think about that, but manage your parental expectation, take hold of it, be upfront with them. If you're just about to start on this journey, be upfront with them around don't expect your young person to be sitting there from 9 to 3 completely engaged, because this is only part of their learning, and we've given that out there. Help them to understand, if you can, what they can do to help in this journey. But let me just be really clear in you have to make it sustainable for you. One of the questions that came in was around, how do I do all of this while I'm sitting with my own kids, sitting next to me at home expecting this, and I'm trying to teach them? And that's a huge challenge. I am just waiting for one of my kids to burst in here with a math question or a laptop that's not working in the middle of all of this, and there's a real challenge in that space of how do you do it. And I think, depending on whether you've got younger kids or older kids, depending on whether you've got access to technology continuously and your kids do, whether you don't, depends on how you manage that. But what you need to be able to do is, one of the things I find most difficult about when I moved out of teaching, I've been out of teaching and in this role for about 3 years now, and before we went into lockdown, I worked from home 2 or 3 days a week and in the office the rest of the week. But one of the things I find really hard about working from home is switching off, is drawing a line under the end of the day, because 4 o'clock becomes 5 o'clock, becomes 6 o'clock. And before I know it, my kids are walking into my home office saying, "Good night, Dad," disappearing off the bed. And it's kind of 10 o'clock and I'm still pottering away. And so there's just trying to set up some structures for myself to go, do you know what, at 5 p.m. or whatever time, I'm logging off and I'm going to make myself do that. Now, again, that's not going to work for everyone. But just think about some practical ways you can put in. Think about what's the best value for your own kids at home to get some time out of you, and how to do that. The reality is that in this time, and I kind of pushed back to where we started, because there's been some questions around this. At this point in time, in so many ways, the biggest value that teachers are struggling to add right now, the thing that they are, how do I do this, is things like the calming presence. You're the stability in their lives. You're the kind of source of connection and often emotional support. We spend as teachers more time with students in school weeks than often their parents do. And so, these things probably help us. It's probably a nice pivoting to how do we do things like that? How do we do the pastoral care? There's lots of questions coming in around that as well. How do we do the pastoral care? What's the priorities there? How do we manage that? Mandy, what's your thoughts on that sort of thing?
Well, I think, my first thought is around real conversations with parents, and it's probably a time when your conversations with parents are going to be a little different to that cursory meet the teacher conversation, when you're telling them how you're going to run your class and it's a very formal conversation. I'm thinking that hopefully you can have real conversations with the parents. What's it like? How much engagement is going on in your home? What can I, we want to be careful about when you're saying how much can I help, but I think you need to sort of find out what is going on in the households to have a better understanding of that. And then, of course, then, what are the parental expectations? And I was also thinking about, when we're dealing with parents in the classroom, we do always have that range of parental expectations, and it's usually around things like homework, and there'll be that parent who's the homework's never enough, they need more, they need more. And we usually say something along the lines of, well, that's absolutely fine, you know, you're more than welcome to Google some more stuff on that, or get your child to, you know, do some work on you in the garden looking at the insects or whatever. You try to kind of deflect that with, you can take that as a parent and take it where you want to take it. I'm sort of thinking that's going to be applicable in this situation where those parents, you know, you can just provide a list of practical things they could do with their children and explain to them how valuable that is, that in some ways that's more valuable than especially the lower down levels, than worksheet work, and there's evidence for that. And so you know, here's a list of things you can absolutely do with your children, but you can't meet the expectations of those parents whose expectations are really high, just like you never would try to in the classroom. You shouldn't be trying to meet them at home. And then there's the reality of the kids whose parents aren't engaged. That's true in the classroom as well. They're the kids that normally don't bring the homework back in. And so just remember, I guess, that, you know, this isn't a clean slate where now you have to try and have everybody perfect on the same playing field. You're dealing with the same issues, but in a harder environment. So I think what I'm trying to get at there in a roundabout way is I feel like it's going to be about being real with the parents and finding out where they're at. Yeah, just so that you can manage, you know yourself too, what's achievable. Because if a parent's totally disengaged, you can provide opportunity, but other than that, you know, you can't hold yourself to a level of performance or something that's impossible to be achieved. So connect with the parents on a real level, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think that's really, really important, and I think you know, Fran has just made the point, or made the comment of just feeling really pressured just now, because we're hearing that this is potentially going to go on for a long time. We're hearing that there's likely going to be a demand for us still to report in Australia at the end of next term, and all of a sudden we're in this pressure cooker of, how do I get learning and teaching out the door? How do I mark and gather evidence for this learning and teaching so that I can write reports? How can I show value add? You know, I heard one principal at the end of last week talk about Gonski 2 and the whole idea of a year's worth of learning in a year is still entitled, whether you're distance or face to face, and that's all very ideal, and that's all very right and true. But at this point in time, we are in a place where we need to survive, and I say that very respectfully. You cannot begin to optimize what you're doing, or even get into a place of thriving in what you're doing, until you've survived the initial period. And I go back to the title of this webinar. You know, it feels like we are building a plane mid-air while flying it. And right now, we're not worried about painting that plane, or you know, the food that's going to be served or anything like that, because right now we really are in the middle of that kind of surviving mode. And so I think, you know, one piece of advice that I would give to you is think short term just now, as much as that might be you know, against how you normally think and how you normally plan. Think short term. You know, in New South Wales, if you want to deliver distance learning, you have to be accredited by Education Standards Authority in New South Wales, and you have to go through a 9-month accreditation process before you're allowed to do it. Many of us didn't get 9 days notice to go into this journey of remote learning and teaching. So this is not normal by any manner of means. It's not where we should be, but we're here, and we have to get, you know, I've heard it in the news, and it's very cliched, but it's true. We're all in this together, and we have to get through it together. And so my advice would be, you know, start small. Think about what you would do in the classroom, and then think about how you can flip it. You know, Jodie shares that they're using the Seesaw app and hoping that will help. Seesaw is a great app. There's other apps like it where you can just interact back and forth with young people at home and the teacher. Again, acknowledging that that's if you have technology and technology access to it. But the whole idea of starting off small, starting off being kind to yourself, and remember the importance of connection with each other. Robin's asked the question, how long do you think we will have to teach remotely? Robin, I'm not going to answer that question because I don't think we'll like the answer to it right now. I think we just have to teach remotely for this week, and then next week, and then the week after. I do think that we're in this, from what I'm seeing and hearing around the world, I think that we are in this for the medium term. I don't think that we're going to get back to face-to-face anytime in the next 10 weeks. I would be very surprised if we're back to in term 2 in Australia. We may well be, but I don't think we will be. And so I think that's why sustainability is incredibly important, and that's why connection is incredibly important. And I think with 10 minutes left, and I feel like we've done you guys a disservice because I don't feel that we have got anywhere near talking properly about engagement or assessment or differentiation or even explicit teaching or a whole host of things. And so I'll just have to hook you in to join us on the Facebook page and talk some more in that space, and come back again next week at the same time to talk some more. But and I'd love you to get through to us questions up front, but I would love to spend the last 10 minutes talking about the importance of connection at this time. As teachers are social beings, as teachers value connection, and we're incredibly hardworking, driven, diligent people. I just have to look at the fact that 180 people want to join us here today at 4 o'clock on a Wednesday afternoon in Sydney, and whatever time it is where you are, to talk about this stuff. We're committed, we're driven, we're trying to figure out how to do it. Robin asked the question, how long do you think we'll be in this? And I think honestly, we're probably talking 10 weeks. I hope it's not that long, but I think we're talking 10 weeks. And we have to get through those 10 weeks. We have to come out the other side able to still exist and do this and go back to schools. And so let me talk about the importance of connection. Let me talk about the importance of connecting with your peers, particularly if you're all now remote and you're not in school at all. The importance of having a virtual conversation with someone real time is really important. I think that Mandy and I were working together 6 months before we met face to face, just because of the geographic differences. But yet we had managed to stop and have a cup of coffee together. I apologise for my really bad coffee mug there, or a glass of wine. And that whole connection is really important, because you think about how often you do informal debriefing in your staff room at lunchtime, how often you kind of chat to someone sitting next to you. And all of that stuff is really important. Sorry, I'm just getting some messages that you can't hear us. Can someone just confirm that you can still hear us? I have to apologise. The connection has not been good today. I'm getting feedback on that our connection, both video and sound, has been really poor. I'm sorry. We are both working remotely from home, and the online platforms are really struggling, whether it be GoToWebinar or Zoom, or all of them are really having more demand than ever before, and they're going to be challenges as well as we move through this. But let me just push into that, the importance of connection. Make sure you connect with your peers. Make sure you have that debrief. Make sure you have that place where you share what went well and what didn't go well. Come and share it with us on that Facebook page. But let me also encourage you, and this is not to make you feel guilty, but let me encourage you, in the middle of trying to plan learning and plan content and plan resources, let me remind you that it's about the young people, and there's a whole lot of young people out there that need us more than they ever have. And this is not about pressure. It's about, think about ways to connect with them. Think about how you might do that, whether there's an opportunity to record a video if you've got technology access that they can view. I know that my middle son's teacher has been kind of sending them all a video every morning, and I find my son watching that in the middle of the day, just having a bit of a peek at it. And if there's a way to do that and you've got technology access, great, record a video, but get creative. Is there a need to send a note or pick up a phone? Again, I apologise, I'm telling the same story as last week. I spoke to a teacher that I know who's got year 12 homeroom class, and she said she's had them for 3 years, and she said that it's girls' class, and she said, you know, every year on the birthday they get a birthday card from me, and it was a girl's birthday, and I didn't know what to do, because I didn't get enough time to post a birthday card to her, so I didn't know what to do. So I just decided to pick up the phone and call her. She said, and it made my day and it made her day. Now, I'm not suggesting that you call all your students. I'm not suggesting that you write or send a card to all your students. I'm not suggesting any of those things. I'm just suggesting that it's really important to find ways to connect with your students, find ways to connect with each other, and find ways to look after each other and your students. And it's really challenging. You know, it's really challenging, because there's not one size fits all. And I wish I had the answers today. I wish I could sit here and give you the answers and tell you what I thought the answers were, but there's not one answer.
Ellen, can you hear me?
Mandy, why don't you speak?
Yeah, sure. So I was just thinking about, you know, the sharing thing. Ellen was saying the connection, and I think, and there's no silver bullet, which is unfortunate, because I think, you know, if it was me, I would want to log on to something and you just tell me what it is I do, I'll do it. Unfortunately, there isn't going to be a silver bullet, because every home life is going to be different. Your expectations, your leadership are going to be different. Your age groups are different, and all of those kinds of things. And actually, even just you. I mean, some people love the idea of recording a video and sending it out. I used to do videos for my kids and do the maths, and I loved it. But I know when I told my colleagues, some of them just grimaced and went, "No, that's not for me." And that's the case. Everyone is different. And why I think that Facebook group and things like that could be so valuable is that's where you'll see a whole host of ideas coming through and people trying things, and you'll pick just hopefully a few of those and try them out, fail fast, try something else, let people know what worked, what didn't work, and yeah, learn by trying. Just know that you're not supposed to have all the answers yet, and connect so that you can all share off each other. Those would be my final words, and good luck to you all, and we're here for you, and we'll be in that Facebook chat. And I think we're nearly coming to the end of the time, so Ellen may finish up, I'm not sure, but if we are, then it's been an absolute
Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you, Ellen.
You can hear me, excellent. I'm so sorry. It's the joys of technology, and it's, you know, we're, like I said right at the start, we're not trying to have a polished presentation to give you all the answers. I'm hoping that you can see my screen now. On that screen is our contact details. If you want to reach out to us, I have to apologise that I didn't update the slide for Mandy's Twitter handle, so I apologise for that. That was completely my fault with the technology that wasn't working for us before this webinar. You also see down the bottom there that you can find us on LinkedIn, and that Facebook group is called Remote Learning Discussion. Join us there, come and let's have more of a chat for that, and let's continue the conversation. And please drop us an email, drop us a chat on the Facebook page, and sign up and come and join us again next week. I'd love to hear from you in advance of what things that we can talk about, so that we can prepare as best you can. Next week I'll be joined by another one of the educators from 3P Learning, so it will be me and another one of the educators. And but in the meantime, I want to thank you for joining us. I want to thank you for your patience and your endurance as the tech has failed us. And I want to wish you well in this journey. Remember, don't burn yourself out. Make it sustainable. Look after yourself, look after each other, and let's keep talking about it. Again, thank you for your time, and all the best.